Shivdat, one more question. Shivdat Arun.
So we are live, sir.
Can we start? Or should we wait for viewers to increase? Okay, so very warm good afternoon to one and all, and each and every one of you who have joined this webinar today on Sky is just a starting point, introduction to aviation law and its potential scope. Now let me take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you on behalf of Lex Erudites. For all those who are not aware as to what Lex Erudites is all about, let me tell you that Lex Erudites is an e-journal which intends to publish some quality content and provide a platform for independent ideas and thoughts and constructive ideas on legal issues, national and international developments, and in the field of law and in the society. Let me tell you one more thing, that Lex Erudites is intending to publish articles not only on legal topics, but also the topics which has social relevance. And it is not only restricted to the law students, but it is available to the lawyers as well as other students also. If you have something to write, something to publish on legal topics, as well as topics of social relevance, you're free to contact the team of Lex Erudites and will ensure that your article gets published. All right. So there's something more which I would like to add about Lex Erudites. Lex Erudites from the day one, when it was founded by some exceptional and vibrant and young-minded law students who are the ignited minds of the society, they have come together to with a visionary idea for starting this e-journal and for providing an opportunity and platform for everyone to publish some quality contents. So from the day one itself, it has received an overwhelming response from all over the country. And it has received response from international arena as well. Now, Lex Erudites have received various articles and papers to be published from various students all over the country, and they have constantly been conducting sessions and webinars on various other legal topics as well. And it has received an overwhelming response as well. Students from international arena have also participated in the webinars. So I request you to keep participating in these webinars during this COVID times. It is going to help us in getting more and more ideas and getting more and more openings on various things which are new to us. So I think this is a great opportunity for all of us. And I would like to also tell you that Lex Erudites is actually inviting for papers. It has called for papers, and all those students, lawyers, and various other personalities who would like to publish their papers on socially relevant topics, you are requested to send your articles and contact the Lex Erudites team. Now I feel honored and privileged to introduce the speaker of the day, Mr. Sagar Singamsetty, sir. Mr. Sagar Singamsetty is the Managing Director of Aerospace and Aviation Lawyers Association of India, and he is also the Adjunct Professor at Center for Aerospace and Defense Law, NALSAR, Hyderabad. Sagar sir has completed his graduation and BA LLB from NALSAR, Hyderabad, and afterwards, after completing his LLB, BA LLB, he further got a scholarship from the Dutch government, and he pursued his LLM from the Leiden University. Now, as everyone says, as someone has rightly said, that the higher we are placed, the more humble should we walk, is exactly the same thing which I have learned from Sagar sir. Sagar sir, after reaching all heights of success in the aviation sector, and after taking all flights of success, he's still a very humble and a grounded person. He's a very busy person. Despite his busy schedule, when the law students had contacted Sagar sir for speaking on this webinar, he was happy enough to say yes, because he could not say no to the students. That's another humbleness of Sagar sir. Sagar sir, thank you so much for joining us today. And it is our privilege, and we are honored to have you as a speaker today, sir. So yes, the floor is open to you, sir. We are all eager to hear and learn from you on various aspects of the aviation law. Yes, sir. Welcome,
Thank you,
sir.
thank you, Gajendra, and thank you everyone for being part of this session. And specific thanks to Lex Erudites and the team for actually giving me the opportunity to share a few things about aviation. And probably in the next 15-20 minutes, what I'll try to do is, at least paint a picture of what aviation law is for the audience, or at least this is my understanding of the law. But before I do that, yeah, as Gajendra already introduced me, thanks for the introduction, Gajendra. Yeah, I've been in the aviation transport sector for last 15 years. It's a sector that really fascinates me, and I continue to be fascinated. And the network that I have built in the sector is also amazing, because these people who have been part of the sector are very passionate, and they really want to, one of the biggest goal or objective of aviation or transport sector is to connect people and connect goods, irrespective of where you are and what you're doing, or it's just amazing that that you are able to physically still connect, because those connections are still important. So having said that, yes, I have actually this year, with a few like-minded people, we have started this Aerospace and Aviation Lawyers Association of India. Partly also the reason being that this is a growing area where there is a potential. And of course, as lawyers, we do not see practicing or do not have a specific idea what aviation law means. So we are trying to bring that out through this association and its activities. So one of the prime activities of the association would be is to build a network of aviation lawyers, and also promote the sector as being one of the voice for the aviation sector. This is not just about aviation, it is about space, it is about general transportation areas as well that the association is going to focus. So by end of the year, we try to launch our website, and then of course, probably you'll get to see us there as well. Okay, so the idea of today's talk is an introduction to aviation law. So what is aviation law, or how do we see this particular area of law, and what its scope is for legal professionals? So let me just take few minutes. So I'll take the next 15 minutes or so, and then of course feel free to ask questions, and I'm happy to respond as well. But my idea is, at least because there are a number of students, but also there are professionals probably who are going to be viewing this session. So I just try to bring everyone on par by painting a quick picture. So the origin of air law, so aviation or air law is not something new. Okay, it has been there for years or for decades. So it started with the Roman law, where in the 15th, 16th century, they even I think it was the 16th century, they already started regulating the activities of balloon flight. Because if you remember, maybe in some movies and all, you might have seen all these balloons flying, but under the Roman law, they were already trying to regulate that. So that was the first instance where you could already see the relevance or something to do with air law. What you also have to remember is air law, the legal aspects are by and large coming from maritime law. So if you are a maritime lawyer or someone who has an interest in maritime law, you can already quickly see that a lot of these principles are being carried from maritime to aviation, because maritime has been going on even from 11th, 12th century onwards, or even before. So actually, what triggered aviation law to prosper, or there is further growth in the aviation sector, was the First World War, when you had all the military jets, flying, and that really enabled people to think, or the countries especially to think, what exactly, because before you had a maritime ship which was coming slowly through the seas, and then you could see what was coming and all that. But with aircrafts, you could move from one jurisdiction or one airspace to another airspace within minutes, and these days even within seconds. Okay, so the principle or the rule of sovereignty in airspace started coming up. So what it means is basically the airspace above you belongs to you. That's to put it very simple. Okay, like so anything above your head, it's your property. So airspace also has the same principle when we talk about sovereignty of airspace. So this particular rule of sovereignty was already codified in 1919 through the Paris Convention, and later on in the Ibero-American Convention, and in 1928 at the Havana Inter-American International Convention. So what you'll see here is Paris is, the European continent. The Ibero-American is more Latin America, and then the Inter-American is the northern North American. So you'll see different parts of the continents as well, or regions in the world, slowly trying to codify this rule of sovereignty, because they have already seen that these aircrafts are able to cross jurisdictions. And so there's already some law taking place, or discussions have already started. And in 1994, actually, all this has been replaced by the famous Chicago Convention on International Aviation. So anything and everything that you have to know about aviation, you should go and take the Chicago Convention and read, and read that document. So the Chicago Convention, of course, outlines, I will tell you, the freedoms of the air, but also outlines what are the responsibilities of the states, and has 17 annexes to this convention. Each annex has a specific area that they have codified. So it's for air navigation. There's an annex on air navigation. There's an annex on security. There's an annex on safety. And even there's an annex on pilot trainings or whatever trainings that are required. So everything is put under this convention, and this has been already discussed, and it's kind of a forward-looking document, I have to say, because in 1944 you would not expect a lot of these things to even come up. But because when I say come up, these things, what we see today, are already part and parcel of that convention. So that really sometimes even amazes the people who are in the sector for a long time. So having said that, it's one of the, let's say, a core document which you should really know about. And that probably would be the starting point for you to even understand what air law is, or what the rights and obligations of various actors or stakeholders within the air sector are, or the aviation sector are. So I'll just keep moving. So, but trying to link more into relevant or practical side of things, what we see today. So one of the things that you see clearly as an outcome of the Chicago Convention is the bilateral air services agreements, or the possibility for commercial air services between states. So the fact that you're able to fly from one country to another country is purely because of that convention and the agreements that and the agreement that states have agreed together in that convention by becoming a contracting state. So when I say bilateral air services agreements, so let's take a quick look at this famous chart, which you already, if you're in the sector, you might have come across this, but otherwise it's quite interesting, because so we call them air freedom rights, or freedom rights of the air. So basically what it allows is for airlines to cross border, or go from point A to point B. Okay, so what is important before I explain this chart is, so air law could be divided into public air law. You have under public air law, you have all these contracting states and various conventions that you will come across, which is one of the most important one being, of course, Chicago Convention. And then you have private air law, which I will explain. So these are the two separate realms that you should always keep in mind. So under public air law, of course, the Chicago Convention allows these bilateral agreements to be put in place. And you will see, for instance, what it means is under the public air law, or what the Chicago Convention and the related conventions allow is, so let's say the first freedom. So you're able to travel, from your home base. So let's say Air India traveling over Dubai. So that's the country A. So you have overflight rights, and then goes to Paris. Okay, so it's basically the overflight. So overflight does not require any specific permissions, but it has to provide a route plan and notify the authorities saying that the flight, here is the route plan, and therefore you are notified. And from a practical standpoint, these route plans are filed, or at least you have to get authorizations or approvals from the appropriate authority. So in India, for instance, DGCA will have to receive all your route plans. So they divide your, they have 2 times you have to file your route plans. One is for the summertime and one is for the winter schedule. So the second freedom right is basically you have a right to stop in country A as a, like for instance, if you have to refuel, okay, it does not require a permission or anything, but again, it's the refueling aspect that has been covered here before you fly from that country to another country. What it means is you do not have a right to pick passengers or pick cargo. It is purely a pit stop, let's say, okay? So here as well, it's not an emergency flight. That's totally different, an emergency situation. But here is just the fact that you're able to stop in another country for refueling, and then you fly to another country. And the third and fourth are your standard air freedom rights. So country A flying to country B, and then country B flying to country A. You will see that everywhere. So it's point A to point B. So India flying into France, or France flying into India. These are your very standard, And what we also say under the aviation terms is these are very restrictive. So it's very restrictive because you can determine your frequency, your capacity for passengers, and you could also do your pricing. So if, let's say, you have only Air India being the designated carrier, then you could say Air India, you will only do 2 flights per week, okay? And with this capacity and with a pricing cap of, let's say, 1,000 rupees per ticket, okay? So, but again, this is all historical in a way, but third and fourth has always been quite relevant, okay? I say historical because when the whole aviation, this whole flying from one country to another actually evolved, people were also like thinking, how do we protect our own carriers? It's all those rules of protectionism were already in place, and it's a very highly regulated sector. Even till today as well, it is, even though there's deregulation taking place, there has been a lot of liberalization in the 90s. And also privatization has taken place, where a number of private actors or private operators have come up. Still, it is a sector which is heavily regulated with rules, and you will see that in the Chicago Convention as an example through the annexes in terms of each and everything from pilot training, from safety and security related norms that airlines, airports, ATC controllers, everyone have to put in place. But having said that, this is more about even on the operating side as well. For the air carriers, they have to follow whatever is agreed between the states through a bilateral agreement. One of the most fascinating thing about this whole chart is the fifth freedom. So the fifth freedom is what really allows today So the fact that you have Emirates, for instance, doing or able to fly from one country or one continent to another is because of this fifth freedom. Or the fact that you have US carriers flying via Europe and coming into India is because of the fifth freedom. So just to give you an example, so you have a flight from New York coming into Charles de Gaulle, France, and then comes to Mumbai. Okay, and that is because of, so this is the US flight taking off and then comes to Charles de Gaulle and then is coming into India. And that's because of this fifth freedom. And the fifth freedom allows the US carrier to actually pick up, so drop first of all. So the US carrier will drop off some passengers here in Charles de Gaulle and then will pick up passengers again from Charles de Gaulle and brings them to India. What it means is that the local market, so what the US airline is able to do is to capture this market which is available here in France and then bring them to India. And this is exactly what most of the airlines do, whether it's Emirates or you can take even Air India, Jet Airways. Until in the recent past, Jet Airways used to fly from Mumbai to here in Brussels. Oh, by the way, I live in Brussels, Belgium. And then from Brussels, it used to fly into JFK, John F. Kennedy in the US. And this is purely because of the fifth freedom. Okay, and this is kind of, this is one of the biggest air freedom rights that you could get in a bilateral. And if you're able to get your fifth freedom, that means from an economic standpoint, and you're also able to gain a lot of passengers, but also bring your own connections and build your overall air network in an effective and efficient manner. The other important air freedom right I would focus on is the seventh freedom. So what we call also cabotage. Okay, so it's basically a cabotage is, or even you could see this in the ninth freedom as well. The seventh is relevant because in Europe, because it's a European Union, so a US carrier coming into France is also able to fly into another European country, which could still be seen as one single market. Okay, and normally you are not allowed to do cabotage, and the reason is because you want to protect your own airlines, you want to protect your own market from being taken away by a foreign carrier. So if you see in the ninth freedom, you will see that, so let's say you have a US carrier coming into Mumbai, and then from Mumbai picks up passengers and then brings them to let's say Visakhapatnam. So that's my hometown. Okay, which you will never see that. It's not going to happen. But these are all the air freedom rights that the Chicago Convention allows, at least to say that these are all the possibilities, provided, of course, sometimes it so happens that there are few countries or few good examples in Africa, in also in Latin America, where the cabotage has been allowed because they do not have their own airline, or they do not have the requisite capacity that is necessary because there's too much demand and then they could not meet it. So there are various reasons why a cabotage operation could take place, but normally it's next to impossible, because that's basically giving away your market to a foreign carrier. So I think it's pretty important to understand the air freedom rights, because only then you will also see how this whole behind the scenes, let's say, what is also happening. Okay, when I say what is happening is, you could see what are the airlines that are designated, what is their capacity, frequency, the pricing, and the overall competition in the market. And also you'll start getting into issues like so aircraft leasing, wet lease, dry lease issues. So there are a number of fascinating issues that you will come across just by reading the Chicago Convention and the bilateral. Just Google, take out a bilateral air services agreement. you'll already see a lot of these aspects being covered from a public air law standpoint. Under public air law, what is equally important also is a penal air law. So over the years, you have seen, or at least at least we have all read that hijacking, for instance, was one of the first things that used to happen in the 80s and 90s. And later on, you had unlawful seizures. So aircrafts were diverted to another country, and then and then grounded by some terrorists. Okay, and then of course you have the unfortunate famous incident of 9/11, where 3 aircrafts went and hit the towers. So even the penal air law has been codified to say what the roles and responsibilities of member states are, or the contracting states are. And the extradition rules are clearly outlined there in terms of if they know who is the party responsible, then the country that has the jurisdiction, they would like those people to be extradited. So the penal air law is equally important. Of course, not everything is codified, but the point is there are a number of rules, including the rules for a commander of the aircraft. And you saw that in 9/11 when people were able to, some of the passengers barged into the pilot cabin. The rules were modified further, and they were also they also became much more stricter. But the point is, a part of the penal law has already been codified. So probably it's also of interest for you if you have a criminal lawyer or criminal legal background, maybe take a look into the penal air law side of things. Under the penal air law, what is also something interesting, and probably you will connect very well, is the air rage, or the unruly passengers, as they call. The recent incident where I think there was some famous person in India where Indigo airline basically said you cannot fly anymore with us for a period of 6 months. So if you really look at it, it's a transformation. So it's hijacking, it's unlawful seizure, it's terrorism, and then you have at a very individual, even a passenger misbehaving with the crew or misbehaving with other passengers. And at the end of the day, what the penal air law or public air law always says is that the safety and security of the aircraft is paramount. And this is also kind of a principle that the aviation sector follows, because for them, if there is no safety or no security, then this whole sector will collapse. Okay. So those are some elements of public air law. And if I move on to private air law, you have, at least this is a very simplistic figure or chart to show you who are the actors. But in principle, of course, you have the aircrafts, and then on the other side, you have the airlines, and then you have the airports and the air traffic controllers. Okay, so on the aircraft side, you could say what are the various rules that we could think of. So you could think of aircraft leasing and financing. You could think of all the manufacturing liability issues, because these aircrafts are made by Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, you name it. I mean, there are only few manufacturers. And on the airline side, you could think of so your consumer related issues, your pilot related issues. You have code share agreements, you have interlining agreements. So there are a number of aspects that the airlines also face. And then on the airport and on the airport side, of course, one of the biggest one is the ground handling services and the slots, the airport slots that are available. So airport slot is basically the parking spaces that you get for each and every aircraft once it lands. Okay. The point I'm trying to make is everything is related to some kind of a legal framework, some contractual arrangements, some regulatory and policy based, there is some regulation and policy basically behind it. And then, of course, you have the air traffic controllers who control. So basically, you're always on the tarmac. You're always kind of spending a couple of minutes because the ATC controller hasn't given their green signal to take off, and they also have an important role. And and they are also bound by certain rules of aviation. I think under the private air law, what is important in terms of international conventions is the Warsaw Convention and the Montreal Convention of 1999, which codifies the rules of for consumers, for passengers, basically, in terms of any death or damage or loss to their baggage. Okay, so this was one of the first things that took place when they were discussing about at an international level. What is it? Because airlines are going from one country to another, they are crossing jurisdictions, so they have to codify, at least to some extent, what are these, what rules could these airlines be bound by in case of any negligence or any other incidents that take place, and vis-a-vis how consumers could be, or passengers could be, compensated. Similarly, you also have something more relevant on the aircraft financing side when we talk about, because aircrafts are an expensive asset, okay? So when an aircraft is manufactured, so let me give you an example. So an aircraft, a 777, a Boeing 777 costs 170 million, okay, per one single aircraft. An A320 costs around 60 million. Okay, so these are very very expensive assets, and these assets are manufactured and then they are bought by an airline. Or actually, if you really look at it, it is bought by a lessor, which is backed by some kind of banking, which is funded by banks to buy those aircraft. And then those lessors actually lease those aircrafts to airlines. Okay, so the banking companies could be sitting in New York or in London. The lessor normally is sitting in Ireland. Okay, and the airline could be in India, which means that the aircraft is flying in India or anywhere else. It doesn't matter where the aircraft is flying. But what it means is, so movable property, immovable property. When you have a house, and you go to a bank, you ask for a loan, they already ask you like 100 different things. And this is for an immovable property. Imagine now for a movable property, which you have no control. Your asset is going out of your hands and you are not sure if your asset is going to come back. Okay, or even if it comes back, you do not know when it's going to come back. I'll tell you why I say that in a moment. But the point is, so the Cape Town Convention was trying to see that at least provide some level of comfort to the lenders, because they have to be given some kind of a security. Otherwise, lenders would be asking for higher premiums. The insurances also would be going up. Your lease rentals are going to go up. So everything becomes very expensive because there's no certainty within the law. And one of the biggest difficulties in the aircraft financing and aircraft leasing sector is, if an aircraft defaults, okay, so take an example of Kingfisher. Kingfisher defaulted and was not able to pay back to its lessors. So the aircraft had to be taken back by the lessor. But the aircraft did not go just like that. It is impossible because the courts would not allow the aircraft to be taken back by a lessor right away. It takes minimum of 6 months to a year before a lessor actually could see their own aircraft. This is their own asset. Okay, so you have the litigation side of things, you have the contractual issues in place, but just trying to tell you also the number of parties involved at an international level, where you have a bank sitting somewhere in another part of the world, you have a lessor sitting in another part of the world, and then the actual carrier who has already breached their contractual obligations, but then would like to keep the aircraft, because that's the only way that they can continue to operate and make some money and return back. Okay, so again, it's just to paint a picture. So on the private airlaw side, they were trying to codify on the consumer level Warsaw Convention, and you have on the security lending side, you have the Cape Town Convention. And on the airports and ATC controllers, it is by and large always national laws, because they are like your, as I said, it's an immovable property. It is based in a particular country. So you normally have your national laws governing most of the issues. But if you have to take an overall picture of aviation and the aviation related activities, they are somehow governed either through the Chicago Convention rules, or you have another organization called International Air Transport Association. So it's called IATA, or the Airport Council International, ACI. So there are a number of other bodies. These are all private bodies where you have the majority of the airlines and the airports representing themselves. They kind of have some kind of rules, unwritten, let's say, not codified, but at least they have some good practices and code of conduct related charters, okay, that they have come up with. Okay, so that's as I said, you have the public air law, you have private air law, and what is important is aviation, or the activities of aviation are not new. It's just that only recently, or in the recent 5 to 10 years, that we have seen a change where people are taking more and more, they're able to travel because they have some resources at hand. So aviation has become part and parcel of everyone's life. But otherwise, it was a luxury product until even in 1990s and early 2000, it was still a luxury product which was only available to few people. Okay. And then, so if we have to look into the market itself, so you see just the Indian market in the way it is growing, or at least these are the projected numbers that I have seen in a number of studies. And so they say that there's going to be an increase of fleet size to 1100 by 2027. And in the last point, they say there's an expected by 2037, it could even go up to 1700 aircraft. And then even not only in terms of passenger growth, but also you see freight, cargo. One of the things that I have learned, I have always been fascinated, and you will see, if you ever come across me again, you will see that I talk a lot about cargo more than passenger, because in the last 12 years, I have actually worked only in the freight sector and the cargo sector, because I always used to wonder why not many people get into cargo. And today I have to tell you that the B2C market has completely changed the demand you could have for the freight sector. You could blame, or you could say that these are the consumer preferences, because people tend to buy a lot online, and then they would like those to be delivered next day or the following day, or even within few hours. So there's a huge, and also within business to business, that has always been the case. Your washing machines, your whatever, business to business related products that have been manufactured, like your Apple phones, your iPads, everything is coming from one part of the world to another part of the world. Okay, so there's definitely a growth for freight, and you should also think not only just in terms of passenger airlines or passenger related activities, but also think what cargo sector is offering within the aviation sector. And then you also have the airports, so the brownfield and the greenfield airports that are coming up across the country. You might have heard recently the Indian government putting out the requirement that there's need for more and more airports in the country. And in general, it is one of the fastest growing aviation market, and they say it's going to have more than 520 million passengers in 2035 or 2037. So the idea behind this is that there is a huge growth potential, despite the fact that what we hear and what we see, especially the airlines failing. Okay, the airlines failing, that's my opinion. But airlines failing is because of the business models they have adopted or the practices that they have adopted. But in general, there is a huge demand. There is a need for people to go from one place to another in the next few hours or within a certain period of time, which is the shortest period of time. And that shortest period is only available through aviation or through your air connections. You could take a train, you could take other means of transport, nothing wrong. I am not saying which one is best or which one is more, but it is every sector, every mode of transport caters to a specific segment of people. Okay, so you should always keep that in mind when people are talking, aviation is the best in the world or aviation is the greatest thing. But to me, it is good, it's great. I definitely agree with that. Aviation is a fascinating sector to work, and I completely believe that it's one of the sectors that that has actually transformed the way we move and connect with people or goods. So there's no downside or there's no negative talk about that. But please, to me, I do not see that that is the only way to do things. You could also take an, because it's all about your cost, it's all about your efficiency, and then your convenience. Okay. So having said that, but on aviation itself, there's also the government trying to provide a lot of policy support, as you see in the FDI rules, trying to be more and more liberalized, where they're asking foreign entities to basically provide 100% FDI in non-scheduled air transport. When we talk about non-scheduled, so you have the scheduled airlines, so that's your Air India, your Emirates, which come at a certain point of the day and then take you to, like 9 o'clock today or 2 o'clock tomorrow, you have your flight taking off. So that's kind of everything is timed and it's planned as well. But non-scheduled is you do not have a particular timing, or they can operate, let's say, once a month or twice a month. And non-scheduled air transport services are mostly cargo related or your tourism. You have all these flights sometime during holiday season, or they just put like a various number of routes for people to travel. So again, the point is there's a lot of support coming from the government also for the sector, not only in non-scheduled, but also in MRO. So your maintenance and repair organizations, they would like to see 100% FDI because currently one of the things that we lack is the fact that there is not a single MRO in India that is able to repair an aircraft. So when we are talking about 1,500, 1,700 aircraft in 2030, you should also make sure that these aircrafts do not have to fly to Dubai or some other parts of the world to get themselves checked. And by the way, aircraft maintenance in itself is a big area, because every aircraft from a safety standpoint has to go through a number of checks, like check A, check B, check C, check D. Check D is basically your overall aircraft. Every component is removed and then put back again. So they check everything. So again, Chicago Convention actually provides that basis for those, and the annex on safety provides what is required and what is necessary. But purely from an asset standpoint, it's like your house. If there is a repair, you have to get it done. Otherwise, your asset is not going to be of the same value. And here it's the same logic or principle for the aircraft as well. And it's not moving. Hold on. Okay. So let's move to, so that's the projection on the aviation sector, but let's also see a bit of reality. We are in COVID times. It is unfortunate that we all have to go through this, but I will tell you there have been some upside as well. But let's see, here on this slide, you will see that the overall impact, or the global impact of COVID on aviation, tourism, trade, and economy. But just on aviation itself, you will see that almost 60% has come down. So on passenger traffic, 60 to 70%, even in some countries now across Europe, and especially across Europe, I would even say around 70 to 80% it has come. And then it's the same for airports as well, because airports and airlines, the whole aviation activities, are interrelated. And you, from a passenger terminal, you have direct employment, you have indirect employment. So your direct employment, if you say, is the airlines providing employment to their crew, pilots, everything is there in terms of employment. And then at airports, you have the ground handling. And then you also have, again, each and every airline having crew. But the indirect employment that an airport brings is your restaurants, your taxis, your bus connections. Okay, everything is linked to that ecosystem. Okay, and then, of course, one of the things that aviation does is it connects people to travel. So the tourism sector is also heavily impacted because people are not able to travel anymore. And then you also see that there's a contraction in the overall market where people do not have probably enough resources anymore. So there is, of course, an impact on the overall trade as well. That's kind of painting a very negative picture, but again, that's the reality. I mean, it's something you cannot escape, or we cannot, or we could not escape. And what it means specifically for the aviation sector is survival and continuity. Airlines would like to survive this COVID, and when the COVID is over, they would like to continue with their businesses. But the issue is that a number of airlines are going to collapse. They're going to collapse, on an, I think, I've put some airlines here. These are all airlines here in Europe. But then they say that roughly around, they might be able to hold for another 3 to 4 months or 5 months maximum. Because these numbers were already, I think, done in June, July, with the projection of 6 months to 10 months or 18 months. But now with the second wave of COVID, I believe that the expectation or the projection now is that a lot of the overall economy, and specifically the transport aviation sector, will only revive probably in end of first quarter or beginning of second quarter 2021. So what does that mean is also there's going to be drastic reduction of fleets, because a number of these aircraft are already grounded. Just to give you an example, I was reading an article, I think almost like 2 months or 3 months ago, where they said reduction of fleet is going to happen because there are no passengers and they're not going to fly anymore. But what has really bothered the airlines, in addition to this fact of no revenue generation, is all these aircraft had to be parked somewhere. And to a specific airline, it was almost costing them around 1 million, for $1 million US dollars, just to park them in somewhere in this part of the world. And then, of course, you have employment reductions. You have a lot of fixed costs because everything are assets. You have airport terminals, you have aircraft lease rentals, let's say, that you have to still continue to pay to lessors, and you have your insurance premiums that you have to pay. So there are a number of fixed costs that airlines and airports have, and that's not, and COVID is not helping, and therefore there is going to be an overall impact where you will see the demand for the demand going also down, or partly also because there's no demand, all these aspects are coming up. And on top of all this, you still have your security measures. So what you have seen during COVID times is that airlines and airports are putting in a lot of efforts to make sure that it is still safe and healthy to actually travel by air transport. It's not coming, it's not going to be for free. It's just that there are some millions and millions of dollars poured into all these security measures, and who's going to take the bait? It's the airline industry, and at the end of the day, it is the consumers. Okay, so in principle, this is going to take some time. Post COVID, they say that the market will, as I said, it's going to take even years. But for passengers to build that confidence and for passengers to regain that confidence that they're okay to travel by taking an aircraft, and the fact that they will not be contained or quarantined, sorry, because of all these COVID restrictions, only then they would be comfortable to take the flights. But again, the positive, I have to say, is what the positive thing that has come out of this whole COVID episode is one of the things that I have seen in 2004 or 2002 when I decided that I'm going to do something in this area. Like many of you probably who are still thinking now to do aviation, I will give you one single or small piece of advice. People would look at you and say that either you're stupid or you're dumb, because there are many areas of law that you could focus on. Why aviation or why transport? I don't know, but as I said, it fascinated me, and I'm sure it fascinates you as well. In 2002, when I decided and thought of embarking on this journey, I always believed that this is a sector that again, it's connecting people and connecting goods, but also the only sector that where you see in the physical world that you can be anywhere in any part of the world because of this, because of the flying. And I had the great pleasure to also just buy new aircrafts from Airbus and Boeing, and then come by myself along with the pilots on these aircrafts. And when you see these empty birds, it's just, it just gives you goosebumps. But again, it's just fascinating, and they're expensive, but there's also a lot of work to be done behind it, because there's huge investments being made by parties. But what I have seen in 2002 and what I see today is we all take transport for granted. We do not provide, or we do not give the people working in the transport sector the recognition that they actually deserve. And what COVID really made was to realize, or people realize now, how these how the medical supplies actually take place now. The fact that you have medicines in a medical store or in a hospital, the fact that your fruits and vegetables are in your supermarket is because of transport. Everything is connected to transport. You see, I can I can be very vocal about that, because I strongly believe that it's impossible for anyone to do anything without transport. You could have the best of economy, just on your financial side of things. You can have the best of corporates doing all kinds of things. But what is it that they're trying? They have to connect with people. They have to connect their goods to people. Apple could be the best company in the world. But what is it they're doing? They are selling phones and iPhones and iPads. And who is bringing them to your doorstep? It is someone in the transportation sector. You have the big companies of Amazons and Ecom and Flipkarts today. Who is bringing those goods to you? You have your agricultural produce, and you read a lot when government of India says rice is, we do not have proper logistic warehouses to store these grains. We do not have proper means to bring those goods, these grains to people. That's because a lack of infrastructure, a lack of transportation means. There you are not able to connect. And if you are not able to connect these things, like your pharmaceutical industry, your agriculture, your manufacturing industry, your chemical industry, everything is supported by transport. So I have no better example to give you than to say that there is a huge potential in the sector. The only thing is that as individuals, we take it for granted. When you look at a bus driver, when you look at a pilot, you just think, okay, yes, that's fine. You know, they do a job. But these are the people who are bringing them to you. So, and there are people behind it, you know, so not just the bus drivers and the pilots, but there is a huge mechanism. And this is where we as lawyers or policy experts or regulatory experts also have a role to play. We'll come to that. But the point is, in the scope of things, you have as lawyers, as regulatory experts or policy experts, we also have a like they say, a nut and a bolt. You know, it needs nuts and bolts to put a huge aircraft together. And the lawyers and the policy experts and the regulatory experts are those nuts and bolts. And without us, even the system doesn't go. So having said that, yeah, so, you know, again, what COVID brought was a great tribute and the recognition to the sector, but probably they should also be equally recognized by supporting financially as well. But okay, that's for the companies and for the government to do that. I'll move on, but I also want to also understand that aviation itself should not be seen by itself. You should not see aviation in silo. Okay, so multimodal transport is your new thing because of environment efficiencies that we are looking into. When I say that, it's the CO2 reductions, it's the carbon emission reduction that we are all talking about. And with the help of technology these days, you are able to do a number of things, but then those number of things, you have to see it in the whole supply chain. If you're talking about urban mobility or you're just talking about passenger mobility, from the time you start from your house to the time you actually come to the airport, and from there to another part of the world, everything is interconnected. So do not just think that, oh, this is aviation and these are the rules and regulations. Just try to also broaden your scope in terms of what other modes of transport are doing and how you could build efficiency, because as lawyers or policy makers or regulators, you are also steering some of these policies that are being developed by the government. Okay, so you have a role to play there, and you could definitely do by telling, by the way, you have an airport in one corner of the city, but how is this going to be connected? Okay, then you have 1,000 private cars. There's no public transport system, which means that your CO2 reduction will never be, or it's going to be a dream, actually. It will never be a reality. And then you have new technologies. I mean, you have autonomous vehicles, you have these days drones also. You know, drone technology is evolving, and drones are also going to be a big part and parcel of our urban mobility lifestyle, because you will have in future, they say that they're going to bring packages through drones. You have your emergency services being provided by drones. So have a holistic view of what transport means. And even if you are very interested in aviation, I am also very super interested in aviation. But over the last 15-16 years, I have also learned that you cannot just see aviation by itself. It could be your major focus area, but also see the links, because there are also other things that are happening in other realms. And also on the logistics side, you know, so it's very important when you look into the whole supply chain. You have to look into the various modes of transport, your trucking, your feeder network, that allows you to, you know, also for your aircraft to be filled in. So everything is connected, and your logistics, warehouses, the way you place your warehouses and how efficient those warehouses are, everything has a link in terms of your overall operations. So almost at the end of the presentation, but here is probably what you're waiting, or here is what you would like to hear. So what are the opportunities for lawyers? I can tell you that on the left-hand side, you already have enough roles that to fill in. I mean, you have seen the growth projections purely in terms of aviation. But also, if you broaden your scope to other modes of transport, there are a number of roles that we could do. So on the legal side, of course, you have your litigation, where you have your claims and passenger claims, baggage claims, cargo claims for shippers. But also on the legal side, you have your contracts. At the end of the day, everything is contractual. So and you have your corporate laws as well. You have to set up airlines. You have to yeah. So the whole management behind it is also important. And then you have your regulatory. So as I said, this is a heavily regulated sector. It is starting from Chicago Convention to a number of other rules on safety, security, air navigation system. You just name anything within the aviation sector, regulation plays a major role. And then you have compliance experts, auditors as well, where you need to be trained. Okay, so let's say you have a compliance. You could take a data compliance expert, or you could talk about your FCPA. You basically anti-bribery issues, and even just the aviation, even on the operation side, lawyers or lawyers with regulatory experience. So for instance, in my case, I was involved in compliance roles before in the past, or regulatory and compliance for customs, because on the freight side, customs is one of the customs and trade facilitation they call. So it's one of the key areas because it goes back to your trade laws. But again, you have to be there in order to tell what are the new customs regulations coming up, what are the and how the company should adapt themselves. And then you have the policy. So you do your lobbying and advocacy to government institutions, or to advocate through trade associations to voice your concerns as an industry. And that's the whole point of policy experts. And then you have your research, the think tanks. Definitely people who are interested in research, they continue to pursue your PhD or LLM or whatever it is. But again, there's a huge opportunity there as well, because even though the aviation sector, the air law has evolved in the last years, but there's still a lot more to be done, because there's no new technologies and new areas that are coming up in the sector. And then, of course, in the end, you could become a consultant once you have the right level of knowledge and expertise. You could definitely become a consultant to the UN, to a number of government institutions. Even Niti Aayog in India, for instance, hires consultants for specific projects. So what's the so what is it that we are trying to do? So you have those roles, and then I have told you briefly what aviation law is, your private air law and public air law. But aviation by itself is not enough, I have to say. You have to link it with your own interest or other interests, or if you have no interest, build interest. Okay. So let's say you want to do something on environment law. Nobody talks about environment, but every day we talk about, oh, the air quality is not great. Oh, there's so much of pollution in and around the city. But aviation is also polluting. Or transport sector is one of the biggest polluting sector. But again, there is the economic side. You have the environment related expectations. So as lawyers, as regulatory experts, compliance or policy experts, we need to bring that balance. The same in technology. Today we talk about drones, we talk about autonomous vehicles, okay, and all these digitalization of the transportation sector. You have seen in COVID time, contactless payments, everything is contactless at the airport. It's all because of digital technologies that are able to be embedded into this whole operational setup within the aviation sector. So understand what these digital and data laws are, and probably linked to the aviation sector. Competition law, if some of you are interested in competition sector, it's one of the growing sectors, because you have a lot of airlines merging and trying to expand their network. You have a lot of airlines who are also getting subsidies. A good example of what we have seen recently is the US government complaining about the three major carriers in the Middle East. So the Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar basically getting subsidies. Okay, and this is purely competition law and tax laws of a national government. Okay, so link them to aviation sector. So your trade law, I have told you, customs and trade facilitation, your VAT, direct taxes, indirect taxes, it's a great area to work in. Your banking and finance laws, it's again, all your aircraft leasing is based on banking and financing, or your securitization or debt financing. Talk about it, it's all there. If you want to link it to aviation sector, that would be great. Employment law, as much as it could be a bit of a boring subject, or to some at least, I would say that it's actually growing, and it's growing. I mean, it has evolved as an area by itself, definitely, but aviation also, or transport sector, has a big link to employment now, because with gig economy and different employment models coming up these days, you know, with self-employing, with someone being self-employed. So even pilots are self-employed, by the way. So that's the link there with aviation. So some of the airlines actually hire pilots who basically type rate themselves. I mean, they get their type rating for a specific aircraft that they can fly. And then an airline calls you saying, okay, we have this opening, you know, for those routes, you come and, you know, please fly for us. It's interesting because pilots have to go a lot of training, not just on the aircraft, but also they need to understand the internal policies of the airline very well. And if you look at all these aircraft investigation programs or documentaries, you will understand why what I mean when that employees have to understand, especially pilots have to understand what their airline policies are. And then insurance law. Okay, I mean, everything has to be secured for against risk, and everything is contracts. So that's also another area. I'm sure there are other areas of law, but my point is that always look aviation along with other realms of law, because that's when you will also understand better and probably start enjoying the good thing about aviation. So again, you know, understand and apply knowledge of property, contract, and torts. So this is clearly targeting to students who are listening to this. It doesn't matter which field of law or which sector you would like to join, but I have seen that your property law, your contract law, and tort law, if you're very strong, you will, I'm sure you will do well. And within aviation, there is still a great need for subject matter experts. As much as we think it's not required, or probably it is still a rare breed of people. When you work in an airline, they look at you, okay, you work for an airline. But they don't say that when you work for a law firm in a corporate side. They don't say, okay, they don't put your eyebrows up. But when you work for an airline or something to do with within the aviation sector, they're like, wow, okay, you work for aviation. Okay. So you see that fascination is already there, or people think this is not for normal people. Okay, you have to have something extraordinary. So I don't know what extraordinary is there. I think people are pretty normal there. It's just the single advice I would give you is that always, as a lawyer, it doesn't matter whether you're a regulatory, policy, or compliance expert, build sector experience. There is no harm in building or developing that skill, like understand what aviation does, understand what an airline does, and only then you as a lawyer are able to apply yourself better. I can tell you, not to criticize anyone, but I have worked with a number of law firms over the last years. And I have to tell you, like, sometimes I wonder how these people, how these individuals or law firms tend to say that, they have written legal opinions and all whatnot, but it doesn't make sense because they have no understanding of what aviation does. But of course, they have written 100 pages document. Great. I mean, but to me, I could write that in 1 page or 2 pages. And when I have to present it internally, because I have been an in-house counsel for last 14, 15 years, my role is not to send my CEO and the board 100 pages document. That's not our role. Our role is to simplify things and be more business friendly. Because as lawyers and as legal departments, we are still seen as a cost, okay, for the companies in general, or even for our clients. They look at us and they think they're just paying for nothing, okay. But my experience is that if you are able to be, if you're able to understand the business well, and two, if you're able to tell in a very simple language to your business or to your peers or to whomever it is, in a very simple way, what that law means in practical terms for the business, I think you have done a good job. But you cannot just do environment law and say, I want to practice aviation law. Or for that matter, you cannot do anything. And so even pharma, they say that you need to have pharmaceutical experience for 10, 15 years, or 5 years or 2 years, whatever it is. Because these are all heavily regulated sectors. So you need to understand why those regulations are there and what is the basis of those regulations, and then, put law and the legal minds behind it. My last point is, it is a global industry, definitely, and these are all big ticket transactions and big investments taking place in the sector. And therefore, they need experts, they need subject matter experts. They go only to law firms or lawyers who actually have a good understanding of the sector, because only then they know that they're putting their money in the right pocket, let's say. Otherwise, you go to a lawyer or to some other expert who is not an aviation expert, then yeah, it'll be, well, not necessary that they would lose. It's just that it's better that they approach an aviation lawyer or an aviation expert. There are low margins, so do not expect that. It's a fascinating industry. It is high flying, and you will definitely come across some of the best people in the sector. Across the world, you will be able to meet people, but the margins are so low that the whole value chain or the supply chain is pushed. So just as a lawyer, it also becomes difficult for you, because if you are somewhere in the middle in terms of the supply chain, then you will start looking at pushing the others. So sometimes we tend to become too arrogant and too not so nice people, because at the end of the day, we have to negotiate those contracts for the companies. And again, these are national and international laws. So do not think that aviation law is only bound by international laws. There are a lot of national laws you have to also abide by. So it's a mix of national and international laws that you have to get a grasp of and then play along. I think I'll stop there, and really thanks a lot. I hope I made some sense and probably gave some tips, but I am open to have, to receive questions.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a very fascinating and interesting session. And we got a lot of information. It was an informative session, sir. So which is in turn giving rise to many questions by the viewers. So I'll just put on the questions one by one, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So the first question which is coming up by one of the viewer is, if somebody who's a law student or a law graduate and he wants to do a master's, an LLM in aviation law, what are his chances and where should he apply? Where are the best opportunities available? Yes, sir.
Well, this question I had was sometime in 2000, so I'm glad I still receive the same question now.
Yes,
because in 2000 I was wondering, but nobody actually told me where these universities were, and I've come across my professor then who told me that there are a few universities abroad. But okay, my response to this question is, so one, if you look into India, of course, NALSAR University, where I give lectures, is already a starting point if you are looking into India. There are also other programs these days that are being provided. But if you're looking abroad, you have Leiden University, so my alma mater. You have McGill University. So Leiden is based in the Netherlands. You have McGill University based in Canada. So it's in Montreal. You have Nebraska University and also University of Mississippi. These are the two universities based in the US. Okay. And lately, I also came across Emirates also providing some kind of courses. I'm sorry, I do not know exactly, but if you click, if you Google Emirates and Aviation Law, they also have a course. These are all master level courses. So what I've told you abroad is for your LLM and for your PhD, these are 4 universities that kind of have those opportunities where you could go. But if you are looking more for, you're an executive already, or if you're someone who's working, you also have courses being offered, some diploma courses by IATA, so International Air Transport Association. And I think it's something similar that the Emirates group is also doing. It's more a diploma course. So yeah, so these are the opportunities if you would like to do further research. You have University of Cologne, in Germany, where you could do research as well. So they do not have a specific LLM, qualification course, but they do provide you with research opportunities.
Yes, sir. So let's hope that many passionate students come forward and explore the areas of aviation law, sir. So next question, which is coming in is, are the aviation law global or does it change from place to place? And is there still a scope that there is a possibility of the changes in law since we are we are going through another phase of circumstances after COVID pandemic?
Now, as I said through the presentation as well, it's a mix of national and international laws. So it all depends which side of the coin you're looking at. But let's say if you're looking from a consumer standpoint and you are an airline, then you would look into international conventions in case of death, or these are more related to claims. But the same for private international law related issues of financing that I have explained. But if you look into the national laws, you could talk about airports and air traffic controllers, as I said. But again, it's a mix of national and international law. So if you talk purely about environment laws, okay, you have national environment laws, but then you always have some international rules also governing what CO2 reduction should be like. So let's say, take a more concrete example. So we have this Paris Accord, which says that we have to reduce by, say, 50% in 2030, and then by 70% or whatever. So they have, at an international level, they have a target. What the national government has to do is to try to, if you are adhering to that international accord, then you have to set up a plan that where you have to reach that level or those targets. So it's kind of linked, so your national law. So that's where, if you are a student, or if you are a lawyer, let's say in India, have a strong base of your national laws, understand what the national laws are, and then link those laws to the international law, whether it's public international law or private international law, and then you have to see, what you get out of. But in principle, just to answer, yeah, indeed, it's a mix of national and international law if you want to be in the aviation sector. It is one of those unusual sectors where, because you have an aircraft crossing jurisdictions. As I told you, you have a banker in New York, you have a lessor in Ireland, you have an airline in India. You cannot just say that I am good with national law and Indian national law, and the Indian law says this. You also should be able to tell what the international law is and reflect that into your national whatever deliberations you have.
Yes. Okay, I'll move on to the next question, sir. The next question coming in is, how does aviation law operate in developing countries? And I would just like to add one more question to that. That is, like a developing country of that of India, uh, is there any conflict of law between the international conventions and the Indian laws? And how does it operate in developing countries in general? So,
Okay, so there's no specific difference in terms of developing or developed countries. So the conventions I've told you, the Chicago Convention, the Warsaw Montreal Convention for under private law, and also the Cape Town Convention for aircraft security interests. I think most of these laws are standard or they have unified or codified to certain extent the international laws, and we are a contracting party to these conventions. Okay, so there we do not have a major distinction. But to your question, if there's a conflict of law or there is always that element of private air law where there's a conflict. But again, it depends on the issues that we pick up. But let's say, for instance, let's talk about airport slots. Airport slots are, they at the end of the day, airport slots are determined by the airlines through the slot coordinator at the airport or at a national level. But what happens is, it's always the powerful airlines which get the best slots at the airport. Okay, and what happens in a developing country is that most the US airlines and the European airlines tend to get the better slots because they probably are in a better negotiating position. Okay, so to me, that is probably where the developing countries also have to step up, because they are feeding these airlines. It's a contract is a give and take thing. It's because these airlines are coming, they have huge networks that have been built over the years. It's the same with Emirates. Okay, today Emirates serves probably 3/4 of our international transport, aviation transport, and they get the best of slots. Because the Indian government does not have, even though we put all kinds of clauses into the bilateral agreements and all that, but as a developing country, as a country that do not have a strong international presence, an international airline that has a strong network, we are always in a difficult situation to have an upper hand, even though we have the highest number of passengers and there's a growing demand for freight. Okay, so that conflict is always there, but purely in terms of conflict of law itself, you have, at the end of the day, if you look into your criminal laws and other private laws, there's always an element of private air law and conflict that can come up.
thank you, sir. Another question which is coming in is, sir, if one is a law student and he's looking for internship opportunities, where can he look to, sir? Or where are the internship? Yes, sir.
Yes, I think you should look at, so if you're looking at India, then you have a number of law firms, starting from Rajendra Narayan, Luthra and Luthra, you have AZB, but then some of them have a specific aviation practice, but some of them have in their banking and finance departments, because they are catering to the aircraft financing or leasing companies through the banking and finance departments. But if you look abroad, I think you should definitely, you have a lot of law firms in London. London is a huge market for, and also specialized law firms in aviation. They don't do anything else. So check Clyde & Co. One of the best examples I can give you, just to see the areas of law that they're actually offering to their own clients. So if you go to Clyde & Co. website, you will see that aviation law in like 10 different areas that they're catering. So you have, so Clyde & Co., you have a number of other international law firms in Senco and Bird & Bird. So there's just too many of them that are probably willing to provide an internship, and there are opportunities in this firm. And the same in New York, in the US as well, they have a number of law firms as well specializing in aviation.
Okay, sir. So there's another question coming up. That is, what is the scope for practice in aviation law, and who could be our potential customers? Is it the airlines, individuals, or one even have government as our clients? So that's the question, sir.
I think the answer is in the question, I would say. I think whoever wrote it, I think they already know probably the answer. So again, as I said, you could become a lawyer catering to airlines, lessors, government institutions, or let's say for a lawyer, you would say airports, airlines, and lessors. If you're a regulatory expert, you're able to assist the same airlines and the airports, but also work with government institutions or in government institutions. And then because it's like DGCA and BCAS, whomever you name it. And then if you're a policy expert who is doing advocacy and lobbying, you have a number of trade associations, and also your primary audiences or clients or customers are once again the governments and the institutions, but also the airlines and the airports, because you have to steer some of these policies to bring it to the notice of the government. So I think it all depends on what interest you have. But if you look at it, okay, consumers, then you are talking about claims. Okay, so your passenger delays, passenger some damage to your goods, or so those kind of claims that normally come up.
Okay, sir.
And by the way, the other actors are manufacturers. I completely forgot. And you could also think of flight schools. In the US, a number of lawyers are actually only their single important client is a flight school. Because as I said, everyone needs to be trained and everything is very structured or regulated in the sector. So they always look up to a lawyer to say, okay, what is it that we should be doing when we are setting up a flight school or the next steps?
Sure. So there's one interesting comment which we have received. That is, sir, would you please comment on the impact that the UAV attacks and counterattacks have on international aviation law?
The UAV, on international law. So on the UAVs, actually, there's no. So it is still. Let me put it this way: it's a growing area. Okay, each national government is trying to come up with their own national laws. Okay, so safety and security, and especially security, has been the biggest threat when it comes to these drones or UAVs. Okay. And the recent incident was the London airport being closed. Okay, Heathrow airport being closed because of some unregistered drone hovering next to the airport or nearby to the airport. And for a period of half a day to 1 day, the airport had to be closed. Okay, what it meant was that it impacted the whole chain all of a sudden, because all the airlines had to stop flying because the airspace could not be used because of this huge risk. And even the security personnel were not willing to shoot the drone because they were not sure if this might go and hit the drone itself or could possibly hit another aircraft. Okay, so in terms of international, in terms of the link to international law, I would say there passengers are delayed, passengers are stranded, and there's a huge impact on the passenger side. And there, of course, passengers have every right to claim, because under the convention, under the Warsaw Montreal Convention, they or under EU Regulation 261, you have a right to be compensated for delay if the delay is more than 4 hours. Okay, so the risk of UAVs in terms of security is very clear, are very evident, but there are no international laws as such to curb this. But what they are trying to do now is standardize some of the registration requirements and all that. But again, I think it's a long way. We are still a long way away. But what it means is your existing international rules are going to be looked at, whether it's the security aspects or your passenger-related example that I've given you, the Montreal Convention, and there passengers have every right to claim for the delay, because this is an aspect that the government or the airports should have taken care of. You cannot call this as a force majeure. That's my reading. Okay. So if someone could say this is force majeure because this is control, but in fact not. The fact that a UAV or a drone is hovering near an airport is clearly because the airport has not instructed or has not taken the right measures in restricting these UAVs in and around the airport. And in terms of the other point I would like to also highlight, this is only at the airport that I've highlighted now, but what could also be another aspect is invasion of privacy, because you have a lot of drones hovering next to the houses or next to your apartments or whatever it is, and then they could be invading your privacy. Okay, so it is also, and the last but not least, terrorists these days also are using or at least planning to use drones to drop some explosives. Okay, so the security threat is huge, but this is a mix of national and international laws. But on the drones itself, international law regime is not coherent and there's nothing substantive there. So you should look into your own national laws and see how you manage.
Okay, sir. So few more questions, sir.
Yeah, carry on.
Yes,
I'm here.
Yes, sir. So what are the current options available for green aviation? That is for cleaner transport, environmental friendly and the cleaner transport, sir.
Okay, so environment is the new buzzword. So in the aviation sector as well, and I think briefly touched on that point to say transport or aviation as such is one of the major polluters or contributors to the CO2 emissions. So that is something we cannot escape, or in other words, we have to acknowledge what we are contributing here. So the aviation sector has been taking a number of steps through IATA, the International Air Transport Association, and also the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, what they're calling as CORSIA, CORSIA. So someone interested can take a read of that. But basically what they're trying to do is to come up with an emission trading system where, they will start allocating certain points. And if you go beyond those points, then you would have to start buying the units. But I'm making it too simplistic, but I'm sure there are other details. But from a policy regulatory standpoint, there are efforts to basically reduce the CO2 emissions. And the question here is, what is the technological developments that are taking place, because that's also equally important, because on the regulatory and on the policy side you can do a lot, but again if the technology doesn't allow. So you have these days biofuels as an option, and in Europe there are certain airlines already trying biofuels for flying, and they have done a lot of successful flights as well. And even they're thinking of cleaner aircraft, because the composites that are used in the aircraft material, so the manufacturers itself are also making the aircraft kind of lighter weight. So I think there are even the wings, every part of the aircraft they're trying to make it lightweight. So there is definitely an effort to bring down CO2 emissions. I can see. I think there are even the wings, every part of the aircraft.
I would request everyone to mute the audios. Yes. I'm sorry, sir.
No. So the cleaner vehicles, yes, definitely we'll see cleaner aircraft as well in future, because Airbus and a number of other manufacturers, actually there are a lot of smaller aircraft manufacturers that are coming up with various ideas. So the clean transport and clean fuels are part and parcel of our discussions as well. But it's a growing area. I think someone who's really interested in environment and transport and aviation, even it links to your airports. And I have to say, because we talk about environment, so impact assessment, the fact that you set up an airport, your greenfield airport, your brownfield airport, everything is linked to impact assessment and your environmental records that you have to submit before you get the right approvals. So there's a huge role for environment and clean technologies to be, even for the airports, they are thinking of various ways to reduce CO2 emissions.
Okay, sir. So there's one more question, sir. That is, what is the key thing to embark when mediating on aviation claims? I think this question has gone one step ahead, which talks about the aviation claims, sir. In general, sir.
The answer is very simple to me. Understand the aviation sector better. Understand what airlines go through if you're a lawyer for an airline. Because, as I said, it's a heavily regulated sector. And there are certain reasons why, getting a claim approved by an airline is not so easy. But which is understandable, because they're a company, they're a corporate, so it's not like they're willing to pay each and every one for each and every claim. But my single advice there is understand the business well, and from if you're on the client side, there as well, I would say understand the aviation business well, and before you serve your client. But to me, understanding the business is the key thing there, because there's no other way that you can serve your clients, irrespective of where you stand, whether you're a corporate lawyer or a litigation lawyer. Understand the sector better.
Okay, sir. So there's next question, sir. That is, how badly has the COVID-19 affected the aviation sector, and how long will it take to recover? And what will be the help required from the side of the government so that the aviation sector boosts again, sir?
Yeah, good. So I haven't spoken about these financial support, even though I made a passing remark. So in terms of the COVID impact itself, I have said earlier, the impact is very clear, where passenger traffic is down by almost 70 to 80%. On an average, and freight transport, even though there are essential supplies moving around on cargo and freight, but if I have to tell you overall, there's also been a dip in the cargo side as well. And what it means is the impact is real and huge for the sector. That is already under a lot of pressure, because it's not like all the airlines across the world have been in a good financial status. But and it will take I think it will take, so just to step back, if you look into the earlier recession we had, so the difference between the earlier recession in 2008 and 2009 was the recession was only limited to a certain geographical location. Okay, and then airlines were still able to fly and do whatever is necessary, and able to at least make up some of their operating revenues based on the airline, of course. But if they had an international network, they were able to make up some of the revenue. But in today's case with COVID, the whole sector is silent, or it had to be grounded. All the aircrafts across the world are grounded. So there's absolutely no way that this sector is going to revive anytime soon. It's an uphill task already for the overall economy of each and every country. And for the sector itself, it will be a lot more difficult, because people have to, as I said, get that confidence back. And and there are new means of working now. So if you ask me, these days we all work from home. So people will also start thinking, should I really travel? to go to another. So I think there will be new ways and new thinking that will come up, and that probably also will have an impact on the sector. So having said that, I think what is the question here is in terms of financial support.
Yes.
The financial support I have, this is my theory, and this is what I think. I think all the sectors in the economy are hit. Aviation is no different. But the reason why we say that aviation needs is because aviation has its own position within the national politics, within the national regime. Because one of the ways to project your development or your progress as an economy is through your transportation system. Okay, that's also important. So if you are doing well, that means your transport, your aviation sector is also doing well. Okay, so there's an interlink between your overall economy and your transport. Okay, but I have to say that let's take the case of India. You're asking me a question now that should the Indian government actually support the airlines that are hit due to COVID? The answer is no. First, I do not think, I mean, if there is support to all the sectors, everyone should be supported. Okay. And specifically because, as I said, transport is connecting people and connecting goods. So there as well, there is definitely a need for support you need to provide. And I'm sure the government will have to provide it. And all the whole industry is asking for it. And somehow they need to do it. But I say no, because the financial situation of a number of these airlines were not good even before COVID. Mm-hmm. So the precondition for me to provide any kind of support by the government would be that before pre-COVID, if this particular airline on the books is looking positive, is good, I would say that we need to support them. Otherwise, I would not support, because you're putting your food in the wrong mouth, or you're putting your resources in the wrong pockets. So to expand this further, if Air India today, it has already been too delayed. I mean, I understand the sentiments, because of course, privatization has its own downside, and not everyone would like it. But the fact that you're using taxpayers' money to pump so much money into an airline which is not doing well, and you, on the other hand, you have seen the likes of Emirates growing so fast, which is just next door. You have to think for yourself, what is it that we are doing? Why is it that we are pumping money and then we are still not profitable and we are not efficient? And the Emirati government is also doing something similar. They are also pumping money. They have given an airline to the world that today is one of the airlines that is rated as the best, even competing against the likes of the American Airlines and the European Airlines. So there is fundamentally, my point is, there's fundamentally something wrong in the way we think, and we have developed this philosophy of funding a dying company. Mm-hmm. So I'm not very surprised when Kingfisher was asking for money and the government did not provide that support. Yes. Again, do not take it in a negative way, because at the end of the day, we are people. There are a lot of people within Kingfisher as well who sustained, who had to take the beating because the airline was not doing well. Okay. Yes. So my point is, the financial support should go to the right companies, to the right airlines, and to the aviation sector for sure, if they're doing the right thing. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, why would you? I have already seen in this COVID time that a number of companies, when there was these kind of schemes that have come up to support companies and their employees, even a company that has got a very solid financial position went and applied for those schemes. It's not good to name companies now, okay? But yes, a company that has 1 billion on its books also went out and applied for. And the same company in 2 years or 3 years will come back and say, we need money. Or, so again, I'm not against it. Any funding is good, but the precondition should be that you should only provide money to healthy companies.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would like to add one more thing to it, sir. Sir, that is, as you had discussed, that the companies which were running in profit or working in a good manner pre-COVID time, they should be financially aided by the government. But if we look at the Indian market and the Indian statistics, most of the companies were on the verge of bankruptcy or have gone bankrupt. And I think except for Indigo, nobody was working in a more fruitful manner. So should the government interfere, as we have already very clearly discussed in the presentation, that it is because of the wrong strategies adopted by the companies. So now should the government interfere in planning for the strategies for the flight companies?
It's a very good question, and I think it's bound to happen. Because the interference is probably. So let me give you an example. I have come across a company recently and it's an airline, by the way.
Sure.
They said, we do not want to take the government support, but they're dying. They're trying to look for other ways to finance themselves. And the single biggest reason they have mentioned was the fact that the government interferes or supports, not interferes yet, but supports us in. It becomes a lot of, so the government in a way is also going to interfere, because the government will say, okay, I have given you $1 million or 10 crores, whatever. Okay. So show me the accounts now. You have to be more transparent. You have to become more and more aggressive, and you have to show some solid strategies that are going to work out in order to ensure that this 10 crore that the government has given is actually being used in the right way. So you have to open your books, let's say. So which means that that's already kind of an interference from the government. Even though the government per se would not say that's interference, or, it's just the rules, If you're taking a loan from a bank, the bank would expect you to come back and tell them in 6 months what you have done and what is it going to look like in next 6 months for your business. But here you call it as government interference. And I think it's happening everywhere as well, because the number of companies who are seeking this kind of support are also wondering, what's going to happen in future, because the government might be asking them more and more. As they say in the policy area, you give them a little finger to the government, they eat your whole hand, because that's the level of interference that happens with the government. Another example I would like to share also is, so you had this recently during the COVID time, we had this issue of paying back customers or passengers. So you have the passenger rights, of course, where for delays and for especially for delays, you had to pay back the passenger, or for the fact that some of the flights were not even for cancellations. Sorry, that's the word, for cancellations. And the airlines here in Europe under Regulation 261 were saying this is all force majeure, and therefore, airlines should not be paying back for cancellations or for delays. And it's a similar discussion that took place in India also. And by and large, the airlines came back and said, let us offer some kind of vouchers which could be used by consumers in a year or 2 years. Okay. The difficulty with that is that we know on one hand, these airlines are going to go bust. So what is the value of the voucher? From a consumer standpoint, it is not good. So under Regulation 261 here in the EU, or the same in India also, but we don't have a similar regulation. Here in the EU, it's a lot more stringent. So they have really the consumer concept much more stronger. And then they said, no, airlines have to deal with it because they have to pay. The difficulty is, if the government, if the EU, European Commission would have said, okay, this is a force majeure and therefore, you don't have to pay. it could have gone politically, it could have been a blunder, because that means you are supporting the businesses as and when you feel like, and then you put consumers preferences or consumer as such below the business interests. Okay, and there the European Commission actually said, even the Indian government said, we never asked airlines not to fly. There's a huge difference during COVID time. None of the governments actually said do not fly. All they said was that due to health reasons, people should be staying at home. So that was the argument from the government. The government said, we never asked you to stop. You can fly if you want. But then the airlines, what are they going to fly with? Whom are they going to fly with? You see the dichotomy there. So that's also the reason, again, coming back to the point of financial support, the government was thinking, should we really support these companies? Because we never said to stop. They have stopped it. So again, financial support is good. I do think it's a must, especially for a sector like aviation, which is cost intensive, and also there's a huge employment, direct employment and indirect employment linked in the sector. So in order for us to sustain the COVID time now, and also for future, because once the COVID is over, you still need these businesses to survive. Okay, so therefore, I think some kind of support is necessary. But I think it should be conditional support.
Sure. Sir, I would like to end the questions on a positive note. That is, as we all know that the Indian population is increasing, and we are also aware that there is an increase in the upper middle class or in the middle class families in India. So that would boost the aviation sector and would also rise the demand for new aircrafts in the country. So would that give rise to a lot of opportunities in the aviation sector for lawyers as well as the upcoming aspiring lawyers and the law students?
Absolutely yes. The answer is yes to that, and I strongly believe that this is also a good opportunity for people to reflect during COVID times, in terms of what you would like to focus on. And, there are a couple of areas I'll have to just tell you. Pharma, agriculture, transport. Tell me any other sector that you have seen in these three, apart from these three, that you have on a daily basis that have touched your lives. Of course, finance, but this is all, the underlying layer is the financial sector. You need to have money. But these are the three sectors that have been doing day and night, providing what we need today. Okay, and when we talk about transport, it has a huge potential, and as I said, aviation itself has a huge potential, because there's a huge growth market in India, and also in that part of the world. There is going to be many more opportunities, whether you are a lawyer or a regulatory expert or policy expert. But even if you look into the whole transport spectrum, from the likes of Ola, Uber in your day-to-day life, which is already having a significant impact on each of us, which is also governed by the way transport laws for motor vehicles. Starting from there, you have something of, like all these days with COVID, people are also talking about cycle coming back. So hopefully the hero cycles that I have used years and years ago are going to be back on the roads. So I think every facet or every aspect of transport is going to be coming back to discussion now. And then you have new technologies like drones, okay, and this whole interface between humans and the customer experience. Everyone is talking about, you go to an airport, you go to an airline, everything is going to be digitalized, and so there are enough opportunities there. in the cargo sector, with the supply chain efficiency that everyone is looking at for goods transport, I mean, from your trucking to your small feeder aircraft feeding into your hubs, everything is linked. Everything has an opportunity there as well. So to me, the answer is yes. Of course, COVID is unfortunate, but again, it has shown the potential what transport sector has and that it can do or contribute, not only in normal times, but also in these demanding times, which means that it is an essential service. It is an essential part of our life. And there is a huge need for lawyers and regulatory experts as well in the sector. And today, I can only tell you there are still very few in the sector. Again, there are a lot of them working, for the aviation sector, but probably they are not the experts, or they are not directly linked, or they do not understand the whole business of aviation or transport. They are providing a service because they are asked to provide. Okay, so they're only doing a small element, but I would say that for all the aspirants or people who look into aviation or transport, please get to understand the business better. Try to see holistically what the sector has to offer, and I'm sure for you as well, there are a lot of opportunities within the sector.
So we have covered all the questions, sir. So what will be a 30 seconds message which you would like to deliver to the law students and the lawyers, sir?
One, aviation is a fascinating sector to work in. It's absolutely no doubt. Despite the COVID, I still believe the sector will bounce back. It has done it in the past, because every 10 years, let's say, aviation sector has always been hit. Let's say when we had Ebola, SARS, whatnot, every time the sector has bounced back. So I am very confident that it will be the same case post-COVID as well. And what it means is that the opportunities for young lawyers or aspiring students for the sector or in the sector is also abundant. I clearly believe that transport is going to play a major role in, as I said, in our lives, and aviation specifically, because now, I think people would like to get to places much faster and do things in a much faster way or within a limited time frame. Aviation will definitely play a huge role. And for the lawyers, regulatory, re- people who have that mindset to become a regulatory expert or a policy expert, my single advice is the operations are very complicated within the aviation sector. There are huge investments being made, so you cannot just say that I'm a lawyer, I'm good, or I'm a regulator, or I'm a policy person with some skills. I think your biggest skill and your biggest contribution to the sector would be to understand the sector better and simplify things. Do not complicate it, because it's already a complicated system. Your biggest contribution is simplify things and put messages that are more understandable. The difficulty with most of us as lawyers is, and I'll tell you this as an anecdote, I have moved from an in-house counsel, transactional counsel, into a compliance regulatory role, and then into policy. Law has provided me opportunities, first of all. Aviation has provided me a lot more opportunities to explore within the aviation and transport sector. But my point is, the reason why I was able to take on the other roles is not because I did not like to be a transactional lawyer. Probably I would have made more money there today if I have to reflect back. But the point is, I could not come across people who were able to simply tell a simple message. as lawyers, we were just trying to say, this is the international regulation, this is the national law, and this is section 2 and subclause 2.2 says that. Nobody cares, to tell you honestly. But I'm being very practical here. I'm sorry if that offenses any of the lawyers here, but there's nothing wrong. That's our bread and butter. We need to understand the law. But how do you translate that? I think it's the translation of that law into a simple message, I think, is what people are looking, whether you're a consumer, when you say consumers, or this is what the government officials are looking, because they do not understand what aviation is, how complicated it is, or the operational difficulties that companies and the sector is facing. They have no clue. So again, keep it easy and simple, and I'm sure you'll all fly high. But then do not forget that at some point you have to look onto the ground. So always have a holistic view of the transportation sector, and also look into the other sectors, because transport is linked to the other sectors.
Thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful session. That was very informative. I think this will surely give rise to a spark in all of us to learn more on aviation law, sir. So it was a wonderful opportunity for all of us. I would like to thank you, sir. And I would like to invite Shivdat Madhumenon, who is one of the founders of Lex Erudites, for delivering vote of thanks. Yes, Shivdat.
Thank you, Gajendra. Thank you very much for the opportunity again. And thank you everyone for listening.
Yes, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the entire Lex Erudites team, I take this opportunity to thank all of you who have directly and indirectly contributed to this flagship webinar, Sky is Just a Starting Point, Introduction to Aviation Law and its Potential Scope. At the outset, I would like to thank our speaker, Sagar Singamsetty, sir, who have accepted our invitation despite his busy schedule. Thank you once again, sir. We are enlightened with your knowledge and presence. Thank you, sir. And our moderator, Advocate Gajendra Singh Rajpurohit, who has always been a constant support and is also an inspiration to our entire team. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you,
and yes, a heartfelt thanks to all our participants for your overwhelming response and indeed making this webinar a grand success. I hope this webinar proves to be beneficial to each one of you. And yes, as our moderator had mentioned, Lex Erudites is accepting articles and blogs on different socio-legal topics. And if any one of you have to get your articles or blogs published, please do get in touch with us. We'll definitely get it published for you. And yes, once again, thank you all. Good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.